Morning everybody, Andy here again, day 49. Put the figures down below, and as usual, as expected, because of the weekend, the figures are always slightly lower. Hopefully this is a sign of the future, but somehow I don't expect it will be. The deaths reported yesterday, 210, which now takes us the total deaths to just over 32,065. Obviously, what I'm going to be talking about today, I'll try and vary these things a little bit, try and be a bit more light-hearted, some other things, some thoughts and that. But obviously, the only thing I can really talk about is still this sort of fallout from Boriss's speech, his announcement the other day, and what happened yesterday going into Parliament and all the confusion. One thing I would like to point out straight away is that I do actually want the government to do the right thing. I want to support the government. I want to support them and hope that they get things right. I don't want to see them fail, because if they don't get things right, and if they do fail, that will only mean one thing: more people will die. And that is not what I or anyone else should want to see. And anybody who wants to see the government fail, right, well, they can just go the other way, you know what I'm saying. Because regardless of your political persuasions, I didn't vote for this government, and maybe we're starting to see some of the reasons why I didn't vote for this government, but I still want them to succeed. I still want Boris Johnson to do the right thing and to get it right, so that we do get over this. That's the only way we're going to do it, by this present government getting things right. But the trouble is, as I said, as much as I'd like to support them, I'm finding it increasingly difficult because of the way that they're doing things. And I've written a few things down, because I wanted to mention a few things, because after the speech, I mentioned yesterday, for example, about how Boris had said on Sunday night that everybody should go back to work who could go back to work on Monday. Yesterday, that was clarified or made muddier, I don't know, because Matt Hancock, I do believe it was, or was it Dominic Raab, one of them, I feel sorry for some of these people sometimes, said, well, no, actually, we meant Wednesday. What? And this is the problem. Yesterday, there was so much claim, counter-claim, one person saying one thing, someone trying to clarify it and saying something else, and then someone else coming back in again. There's just too much confusion. They brought out the paper yesterday afternoon. Boris went into Parliament and spoke. People were obviously, the Dominic Raabs, Matt Hancocks, were doing things on TV and radio and being interviewed by journalists and saying certain things, especially about meeting family members or other people outside of your household. There's complete confusion about that. But I just wanted to go through a few of the things, because this is important, because, as I said, as much as I want to support the government, they need to get these things right. And there's just a few examples of the way that some of these things haven't been thought through. I know it's not easy. Coming out, as I said yesterday, coming out of the lockdown is not going to be easy. But half of the problem is that they're not actually telling you what to do. They're saying, they're appealing to our better nature. They're appealing to us to actually think about things. But that's not what governments are for. It is to an extent, but not in a situation like this. So anyway, let's just go through cycling or walking and talking about public transport. They don't want us to use public transport particularly, because it's not going to be easy to use public transport, because there isn't capacity. Because if you want to do social distancing, you can't really do that on public transport very easily. We all know that. And one of the things that came out yesterday, which wasn't mentioned on Sunday, but which just happened to come out yesterday, I think it was in the 60-page document that the government came out. I had a look at some of it, not all of it. And it says in there that they advise that when people are using public transport or enclosed spaces like that, shops, for example, as well, they advise you to wear face masks or face coverings, because it doesn't have to be a mask, because not all of us have got masks. We could go around like this, or an equivalent. We've all seen people putting scarves over their heads or whatever it might be, just in case you can't get masks. There are alternative ways of doing this, but it's advice. It's not like other countries have done. Other countries have said, if you're going to use public transport, you have to wear a mask or a face covering. But we don't do that here. So what happens if you get onto public transport and you get the idiots who come on who don't want to wear a mask or some sort of face covering? And if you look at it in some ways, they're quite possibly more likely to be infected than other people, because they obviously don't care. they could be going and sort of not socially distancing and walking around like that and potentially getting infected and infecting everybody else who is trying to do the right thing. And that's part of the problem here. So many of us are trying to do the right thing. That's why people like me and you and others are getting so exasperated, because we're trying to do things right, but other people aren't. And apart from that, they want us to cycle and to walk. Well, that's not practical for most people. For example, where I live, I can't have a bike. I can't have a bicycle in this property. There isn't the room for it. And obviously, cycling isn't particularly well thought out in this country as it is on the continent, for example, to go to Amsterdam or even Spain and Italy and places like that. They are set up far more for cycling than what we are over here. We have cycle lanes, but they've just been squeezed into roads as they already are. So it's not always easy. It's not actually safe, particularly, to cycle in a lot of our towns and cities. And if you live a certain distance away, then you can't do that anyway. It's not practical. Walking, obviously, isn't practical particularly either. So you have to use public transport if you haven't got a car. Otherwise, people are just going to get into their cars and clog the roads, as I saw that they did yesterday. So that isn't a particularly good one. But what else have we got in there now? And this is the one I love, the air travel. They suddenly just come up with this idea that people coming into this country are going to be quarantined for 14 days after coming in. I mean, I understand that, but that should have been done 2 months ago, not now. And also, that's not coming now. That's coming in towards the end of the month or something like that. But the even better part about that is that people from the Republic of Ireland and France are exempt. Now, don't forgive me, but how is it that people from two different countries can come in and not be quarantined? Why are they any different to anybody else? Have they just got some miraculous cure that we don't know about? It's ridiculous, and that is, not say double standards, but the way that you thought things through. They've done a deal with France, but so what? A French person is just as likely to have the disease, the virus, as anybody else, So, oh, I'm crazy. Right, I'm going to go through another one. Well, no, we've done that. And the face mask, we talked about face masks and driving, because one of the things I was interested in, because I've said before about going, I like to go for a walk, and I've not done that apart from locally here, where we walk from the property down to the seafront through the park that you might have seen in the videos and that. But now you can go out and do, from tomorrow, Wednesday, you can go out and do unlimited exercise. Effectively, you can stay outdoors all the time if you want, as long as you're socially distancing, which is fair enough. I understand that because of the wide open spaces. But what they agreed, what it says actually in the document, because I looked at the document last night, you can drive an unlimited amount of miles to get to where you want to do your exercise. So I could potentially drive to the north of England if I wanted to, or someone from London could drive down to Hastings or to Brighton or a seaside resort, or drive all the way down to Cornwall or something like that, and exercise in inverted commas, which means that they could potentially sunbathe and all that sort of stuff. Now, the reason we weren't supposed to do this before, we were told we weren't used to drive or to take any unnecessary journeys, was to relieve the stress on the NHS. Because if you drove somewhere, you might have an accident. And obviously, statistically, the further you drive, the more chance you have of having an accident. And they didn't want to clog up the hospital systems with the police, the ambulance, the fire service, the hospitals generally, the A&E departments and all that. But now, apparently, because there's spare capacity in the hospitals, because they're not as crowded as they were, certain aspects of them are, we are now to do that. But I would have thought that they would have put some sort of cap on that, maybe a 20-mile-an-hour radius from your home to go and do some exercise, to drive, to take a walk in a nice wood or in an open space somewhere like the South Downs or whatever you might have where you are. That would seem like a pretty good idea to me, but an unlimited distance, that does seem a bit strange to me. And one of the problems that we have, one of the main problems that we have, is that although our government are talking about these restrictions or these easing of restrictions are for the UK, Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales don't agree. Like, we've changed our policy to stay alert, and a couple of others that I can't remember. In Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales, they are still using the stay at home. And so if I was to drive over the border into Wales, it would be different, the way that things work. And if people live either side the border and with Scotland as well, there is all these anomalies. And one of the problems there is that those countries are doing things differently to us, and it's building up this. It's a fragmentation, because one of the things that has kept all this going at the time, we're all in this together, but we need to be all in this together. But increasingly, we're not in this together, because of all the fragmentation that's taking place, and because of all the misunderstandings and uncertainty, etc., is that we're getting confused. And because we're getting confused, and people like me are getting annoyed and more frustrated, people are starting to do things their own way. We've done everything that we were supposed to do, as I said, or most people have up until now. People are getting frustrated, working and all that sort of stuff. And because the confusion at the heart of government, that is spreading. And so people are thinking, well, why are we bothering? I've seen things from other politicians from other countries, things in the media, from people that you wouldn't expect to, are getting quite annoyed about this. They're getting frustrated. And if you lose the consent of the people, then that's where things really start to fall apart. So, once again, a bit of a rant, but a few observations there that, once again, putting this out there, because this is a diary record, as I said before. I can look back on this in a month, 6 months, a year's time, and think, what on earth was he going on about? It was all right, really. I hope it will be. But that frustration is still there for those reasons that I said, and they need to get a handle on this, make sure that everything is right. And as I said before, they need to admit that they've made some mistakes, because everybody makes mistakes. We all make mistakes. I would expect them to make mistakes, but at least admit that you have made mistakes, that you didn't think about that. Yeah, that's a scenario that we hadn't really thought about. Anyway, I've been talking for far too long, so stay alert. That's what they're saying, and that's another problem. Sorry, I'm going to go again. Stay alert for what? The virus is an invisible killer. We cannot see it. It doesn't walk around with a big sign saying coronavirus here, come and get your COVID-19 here. It doesn't say that at all. It's an invisible killer. That is why we need to socially distance. That's why it is so dangerous. That's why we've been told to stay at home all this time. So staying alert isn't really good enough in lots of ways. We're all aware of it from day one of all this. We've been very much aware of it, because we've been forced to be aware of it, because we've been forced into our homes for 7 weeks or something like that now. So I agree, the stay-at-home message should still be there, as it is in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. I'm not really sure why it's changed, but that's another one of those weird anomalies, uncertainties, and a little bit more of confusion. So stay safe, that's the main thing. Stay strong, and hopefully I shall speak to you tomorrow. Goodbye.